Okay, welcome to this conversation with Marc Sophos of Outcasting. He's the executive producer and founder. And OutCaster Justin will explain a little bit about what that is. This is a Zoom session for the Journalism and Media Studies Department at Lehman College. I want to welcome everybody who is watching this live or is watching the recording of the program. Let me just get my screen set up here. And for those who may not know me, my name is Jim Carney. I am on the faculty of the Journalism and Media Studies Department. I'm joined by some other faculty members as well as students from the program. But let's get our program started here a little bit. I thought we could begin the program by framing the conversation because we are recording this program on a rather historic night or set of nights. And I'm not talking about the national presidential election because on a local level here in New York State, particularly in the Bronx and in Westchester, some history was made. And I'm going to share a CBS News piece briefly to start framing the conversation.
Workers became the first Black and openly gay candidates to be elected to Congress. One of those is Democrat Mondaire Jones of New York's 17th district. The other is Democrat Richie Torres. He defeated Republican Patrick DeLisis in the 15th congressional district. That area represents the South Bronx. Here's what he said about his historic win last night.
We are going to have a United States Congress that is every bit as diverse and dynamic as America itself. 60% of the Democratic Conference in the House of Representatives is women, people of color, LGBTQ. And so I'm proud that I'm going to contribute to the diversity of the world's greatest legislature, the United States Congress.
And Richie Torres joins me now from New York. Hi, Richie. Congratulations. How are you feeling after last night's win?
I have never felt both drained and exhilarated at the same time. But I mostly feel grateful and gratified. I'm about to succeed Congressman Jose Serrano, who has served the Bronx for 40 years. And when Jose Serrano first entered Congress in 1990, I was only 2 years old. And so yesterday's election in 2020 represents a passing of the torch, and I'm honored to represent the next generation of leadership, not only in the South Bronx, but across the country.
And I know we spoke with you a few months ago, but what do you plan to do for the Bronx now that you are heading to the House of Representatives?
So, my greatest passion is affordable housing. For me, affordable housing is not simply brick and mortar, it's the foundation in which you build a better life for yourself and your family.
That I wanted to do
more than half the residents in the South Bronx.
So I'm going to stop that there, just to frame things, because we're coming into a pretty historic time right now. And Richie Torres, who, as he said, he was 2 years old when the congressman he's replacing first went to Congress, and he is openly gay and an advocate for LGBTQ. And he grew up as a young boy of color, a young person of color in the Bronx. So I think it kind of makes our conversation here tonight particularly interesting and timely. So having said that, now I'm going to first ask Justin first to say hello and just briefly introduce yourself. Justin, go ahead.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin. I'm part of Outcasting, and I joined Outcasting, I want to say, late February. And I joined mostly because I wanted to be able to promote intersectionality, which is more so the crossover between issues, and definitely talk about the crossover between LGBTQ issues and other issues like being Black or other issues like being disabled and stuff like that.
Okay, we're going to get into intersectionality later on. In our prep, you gave me a really cool lesson on that, so I think it's something to talk about. And Marc Sophos. Marc, why don't you tell us about Outcasting, what it is, and a little bit about how it came about.
Sure. Okay, so Outcasting is public radio's, as far as we know, public radio's only nationally distributed LGBTQ youth programming in the United States. It's a programming that is created by LGBTQ youth and straight allies, and it's for a general public radio audience. So when we're talking about public radio, we're talking, first of all, about over-the-air radio, although all the programming is also available in podcast and online. But public radio is actually a subset of over-the-air radio. You have commercial radio and you have non-commercial radio, and public radio is on the non-commercial side. What Outcasting, let's see, how it came to be was that I was actually, I'm a longtime radio guy. I've been radio pretty much all my life. I worked for an NPR station. I worked for NPR. I worked for a number of commercial stations, but I also started my own public radio station, which is no longer on the air, but it lasted a long time. And I was applying for funding from a foundation to support the operation of the radio station. And they asked a question: what could you do to better serve or represent an underserved or underrepresented constituency? And I'm gay. I didn't come out till I was 39. So I had a whole lot of, suicidal years during all that time. But I came out in 97. And so this application to the foundation was about 9 years later in 2006. And so it's like, what could we do? And I almost immediately thought of LGBTQ youth. And first, before I go on, I want to say, when I say LGBTQ, that term is already sort of limiting. Some people say LGBTQ plus, because there are other things that are covered by the term LGBTQ that aren't actually in the acronym, like intersex and asexual and things like that. But we just use LGBTQ, but we mean it inclusively. And, I think you don't hear youth voices in the media very much. You almost never hear LGBTQ youth voices in the media. And about the only time you even hear about LGBTQ youth is when somebody kills himself. And so then you have, the sort of standard interview with the parents who can't, never saw it coming, and the friends are at the school with the candlelight vigil, and the school is bringing in grief counselors, and then they're off to their next story. And it seemed to me, when I was growing up, to have a radio program like this that spoke of LGBTQ issues, but from a youth perspective, could have done me a lot of good. And so I sort of wanted to provide that for the youth of today, to provide an outlet for kids, LGBTQ kids, to hear about each other's issues and what's going on in their lives, but also to be an educational resource for a general public radio audience. And, Jim, I know we were talking the other night about why radio was special in this particular context. And if I can, do you mind if I just mention something about that?
Oh, please go right ahead.
Yeah. So there is, in contrast to what it was 20 years ago, there's an awful lot of information about LGBTQ issues and LGBTQ youth also, and a lot of ways for people to connect. But you have to be looking for it. And for people who don't have an LGBTQ family member or friend or something like that, a lot of the time they may not actually be looking for it. So they're not going onto the internet and searching out these things. And so a lot of people are very uninformed about the issues that LGBTQ people have to deal with. And one of the great things about radio is that all anybody has to do is be tuned into the radio station, and something can come on and they just happen to be tuned in and they hear it just sort of randomly. So that's, I don't know, is that enough of a background about Outcasting? It's actually 3 programs.
Right, yeah. Can you explain a little of exactly what Outcasting is? What's the format? How is it distributed? What is it?
Sure. Okay. When it started out, the program was just Outcasting. It was a 29-minute issue-oriented, mostly interview program. We've done a couple of documentaries. They take a lot longer to do because the script has to be written. Whereas with an interview, you prepare for it, you edit it, and you put it on the air, make it all come out to 29 minutes. So that was our main program for a long time. It was our only program for a long time. And we've covered a wide range of issues. Just in the past year, we're currently doing a series on religious liberty and how it's being used to justify discrimination against LGBTQ people. We did a series on conversion therapy, which is the discredited and often harmful of trying to turn LGBTQ people straight. We've talked about LGBTQ refugees fleeing to safety from other countries. A lot about LGBTQ history, the hopes and expectations that can change when parents have an LGBTQ child. I mean, the list goes on and on. We're up to episode 78 now, I think. So we've covered an awful lot of topics over the years. The second program is Outcasting Overtime. And that is a commentary oriented piece. It's not of any particular length. Some have been as short as 4 or 5 minutes. We had one or two that ran about 24 minutes. That was a discussion among a few outcasters about what it's like to date while queer in high school. But Outcasting Overtime basically is a commentary program. And then we actually started a third series, which was, we wanted to have, Outcasting Overtime was originally online only. And then the network that we are mainly affiliated with, the Pacifica Radio Network, caught wind of Outcasting Overtime and said that we should make it available to stations. And so we gave it a new name, which was Outcasting Overtime. It was called Outcasting Off Air before that. And so that became our second broadcast program, and we wanted online content, a program that would be online only. And so it just started out as a series of Outcaster of the Month interviews, which gave our youth participants a chance not only to interview each other, but to be interviewed, so that they got the perspective they got both of those perspectives and experiences without having the pressure of an outside guest. And once everybody had been Outcaster of the Month, a couple of the kids went into the studio. We needed to come up with something else. And so they went into the studio, closed the door, and came out half an hour later with the idea for the Outcasting game show with a Y in there. And the idea of that is that they quiz each other in sort of a lighthearted quiz show format about LGBTQ issues. But they also talk about the issues after they have done with the quiz part. And so there's an educational component about LGBTQ issues in there as well. As for distribution, we provide it to the Pacifica Radio Network, which distributes it to stations. Outcasting Overtime is also carried on another LGBTQ program, not a youth program, but an LGBTQ program called This Way Out, which is on about 200 stations. Outcasting, the broadcast version of Outcasting is typically on between 50 and 90 stations around the country. And we also distribute the programs to stations on a platform called PRX, the Public Radio Exchange.
Okay. Let's go back to you, Justin. Can you tell us a little bit about how you first got involved in Outcasting and what it was about the whole concept when you heard about it that appealed to you?
I first heard about Outcasting in my school's GSA, which is a gay straight alliance club kind of thing, where a lot of schools or a lot of communities or towns will have a GSA to bring together straight allies and LGBTQ youth or people within this community, which was really great. And Mark came to it and he introduced Outcasting as what it is, and he told us how we could pick our own topics and we can talk about our own personal experiences to like Outcasting Overtime. And I thought it was really interesting. I thought it was a great opportunity for me to talk about what I love and talk about what I care about. And when Mark pitched it to me, I was immediately like, oh, I want to work with it. I want to be there. I want to talk about what I love to preach about, basically.
Mm-hmm. And I said this the other night, you have a great radio voice.
Thank you.
Who are the types of people that you have done shows with? Like, who are the other outcasters and what are they like?
Mm-hmm. There are I've met around like 8, I want to say, outcasters, and they range from middle school kids to just graduated into college. So it's like a really good range of like ages. So then you get like the diversity with age, and we also have different races of people, and we have different identities and stuff like that. So I feel like with the outcasters, which is what we're called, like the outcasters, we're very much a diverse group of kids, and it's also really interesting to talk about certain topics in Outcasting Overtimes or in like episodes, and hearing different people's perspectives, because we're both like grouped together as LGBTQ youth, but we still have different point of views.
Without getting into specifics about like your specific school or anything like that, in general, are there resources or outlets for LGBTQ youth to be able to express themselves? And are they things that young people feel comfortable taking advantage of?
I feel like in general, there aren't that many things that are meant for LGBTQ youth within school systems, stuff like that. And I feel like in a lot of schools, the students will have to take whatever the school gives them and make it for LGBTQ youth, if that makes sense. So I
Okay.
feel like Outcasting was one of the first things where it was made for LGBTQ youth, and I was able to understand it and process it and make it the best I could.
Just as an aside, I just want to remind people you're listening to a program from the Journalism and Media Studies Department of Lehman College. We're talking to Marc Sophos, the founding director and executive director of Outcasting, and one of the Outcasters, which is a radio project, because it's more than one program, that deals with allowing LGBT, actually encouraging and promoting LGBT youth to express themselves through the medium of radio. Let's talk a little bit, Marc, about some of the issues that the young people deal with. You talked about them briefly. I know in the most recent newsletter, which you sent to us that I distributed to students, there was an issue there dealing with, I believe it was the religious, the controversy with religious organizations and the intersectionality of, that's not the right word there, but the issue of religion being used as an excuse of sorts. So what was that issue about?
Yeah, well, religion obviously is a source of meaning and comfort for a whole lot of people, but it's also been a tool of really brutal oppression for LGBTQ people for forever. Not forever, but for a very long time, certainly, longer than any of us has been alive. And as when we were growing up, when I was growing up, being gay was literally about the worst thing that you could call somebody. Being gay was criminal in many states. The idea of marriage equality wasn't even thought about at that point. Everybody hated gay people and transvestites, because that's what transgender people were called at the time. The term LGBTQ didn't exist back then. But one of the things that's happened is that as public opinion has been shifting, and I should say that that activism is sort of a three-legged stool, and you need political advocacy, which is LGBTQ groups who lobby elected officials to pass LGBTQ friendly policies, non-discrimination policies, things like that. You need legal advocacy, which is lawyers going to court to fight against discriminatory kinds of things. But you also need public education, because neither judges nor elected officials want to get too far out ahead of public opinion. And so there's a need for a public education campaign to educate the public on what these issues are, so that the public gets behind them and starts to understand them. And that creates a favorable environment in which a judge can issue a ruling in favor of LGBTQ equality, or a governor or a representative or a senator or a president can sign a law that is favorable to LGBTQ people and advances our equality. And so what happens with religious liberty is, as LGBTQ equality has been growing, actually up until the Trump administration, had been growing pretty steadily over the course of about 20 years, maybe a little more than that. A lot of religious organizations and people organized against LGBTQ equality. So you had these organizations like Focus on the Family and the Family Research Council and Alliance Defending Freedom, which has actually been labeled a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center, all using religion to try to defeat these gains that we're making in LGBTQ equality. And so this idea of using, of course, religious liberty is protected by the First Amendment of the Constitution. The First Amendment includes something called the Free Exercise Clause, which means that the government will not interfere with people's right to worship as they wish. And it also has something called the Establishment Clause, which is a part of the First Amendment that says the government shall not basically institute a religion or religious beliefs into the law. And that's sort of what a lot of these religious people are doing and these religious organizations are doing. There's a case right now, I don't know very much about it, but there's a Philadelphia Catholic adoption agency that does not want to deal with same-sex parents, doesn't want to place kids with same-sex parents. And that case is currently before the Supreme Court. So that's just an example. We won marriage equality in 2 Supreme Court cases in 2013 and 2015. But states are eroding it. And to some extent, the federal government wants to erode it, not the Democrats, unfortunately, or fortunately, but Trump has been very much anti-LGBTQ from the beginning. So this idea of religious liberty, yes, it's protected, but you can't use religion to harm your religious beliefs to harm other people. So you're free to believe what you want, but you're not free to use those religious beliefs to inflict harm on other people. And so we've been actually wanting to do this series for a long time. And then there were a series of Supreme Court cases that came out earlier this summer. And that sort of pushed the issue to the forefront. And we got a really great guest named Jenny Pizer. She is a lawyer. She's part of the Supreme Court bar. She's argued cases before the Supreme Court. And she is a marvelously wonderful lawyer and speaks so clearly about these issues. And so this is actually a major series that we have running. All of our programs come out once a month. And this religious liberty series, I'm guessing right now, I haven't finished editing. I'm just editing it month by month. But I'm guessing it's going to run until at least February from September. So it's going to be
just real quickly. I want to go back to Justin, but real quickly, how can people find that?
Okay, so the website, you can get to it either by mfpg.org, Media for the Public Good, MFPG. It's easier if you just go to outcastingmedia.org, and then it's right there. The Religious Liberty series is right there on the homepage.
Okay, I'll make that available later. Justin, I want to go back to you. What Marc just talked about is it's political, it's legal, it's deep. Okay. What does that relate to you as a high school student? And how do these issues that are of such importance relate to you on a personal level? And what types of things do you bring to? You talked about intersectionality before, and I think that's kind of what I'm getting to. So actually, why don't you talk about that a little bit? What is intersectionality and why is it important to you?
So intersectionality is the crossover between multiple different issues, or in this case, social justice issues, like being LGBTQ and being Black and facing both sides of oppression, which is one of my major things, where it's like, I'm a Black gay man in America today, and some things are just harder for me, or because of my sexuality and because of my race, I'm treated differently. So I feel like I saw that in my own personal life. So then seeing how impactful and how different I was treated, it got me got me angry, got me emotional. So then I wanted to somehow use outcasting or use whatever resources I had to promote intersectionality, and not just being Black and gay, but being anything, being any kind of minority, being any kind of some kind of issue, or being oppressed, or something where there's a problem happening and you need help, but then there's multiple problems happening where it's crossed over and overlapping. All those issues matter. So I feel like because of my own experiences, it fueled me to research and want to somehow speak out about other issues.
Mm-hmm. And radio is a good way to do that. You found radio is a good way to do that?
Definitely, yeah. And I think being a Gen Z kid, it's very interesting being on a radio station, because a lot of kids listen to radio here and there, but it's really good because we can get a range of audiences. We can get people from Alabama who are Republican and in their car like going to the store, and they'll hear it and like have their like opinions change. Or you can have some kid in like Connecticut like just listening to the radio because they don't have to do that day. It's a very interesting medium for it.
I just want to let people know you can any questions you might have for either Justin or for Marc, you could type them into the chat. Also, in a couple of minutes, I'm going to open up the opportunity for people to ask questions directly. So please give some thought about to the types of things you'd like to ask. Justin, in terms of intersectionality, I think people like myself, who have led sheltered lives, tend to think of things in silos or in categories and group things into categories. And life isn't like that. And people aren't like that. And I think that what you're talking about is people trying to put you into those categories. And how do you use your conversations that go on the radio to basically illustrate to people that you're not a one-dimensional person, or not even a two-dimensional person, that yes, maybe you are gay, but you are also Black, but you are also a teenager, but you may also be, I don't know, into a certain type of music. I mean, that you're multifaceted. How do you do that in a radio program, in a conversation?
Through radio, I think one way the major way I do it is I just talk about it, where it's like I'll talk about my own experiences, or I'll talk about what it's like with the protests happening recently in the name of the Black Lives Matter movement, or talk about when like Stonewall was happening, like the Stonewall anniversary. I would talk about it and just voice my opinion, because there's really no other way for me to adequately voice my opinion, or there's no other way for me to get to this many people. So I feel like the way I do it is I just talk about it, or I bring up topics, or I bring up experiences to try to have the people listening to empathize and comprehend what I go through, comprehend what different experiences may be astronomically different for them, because they have it, because they're privileged, or they have straight privilege or white privilege. So it's like I just want to talk about it and start the conversation. And then when I start the conversation, people like me and people like Marc and people starting conversation about these topics are the reason why we're going to get change in the world.
Mm-hmm. Marc, what about that? I mean, you, as you alluded to before, you came from a basically a white and straight, even though you were not in turn, you personally were not part of that, but you lived in that world. How has it been for you to relate to the new generation of young people like Justin? Are they because I mean, you obviously have a really good handle on the politics and the legalities and the formal things. How has it been to work with the young people to get to understand them and know them?
I think we all learn from each other. I certainly have learned a lot from the kids over the years. We've been doing outcasting now for I guess 8 years and 9 years and change. And when we started, there wasn't a lot. There weren't a lot of trans people involved. It was mainly a couple of straight allies, but mainly gay and lesbian kids. And as the program has progressed, we've seen a lot more people with less traditional identifications. So we certainly still have gay and lesbian, but we've had more transgender people. We've had some agender people. We've had asexual people. And, that was something that was really interesting for me, because before we did our asexuality series, I couldn't have told you what the difference was between asexual and celibate. And so, we did an interview with our asexual outcaster at the time. We've had a couple. And so it's an amazing thing for me to hear about their experiences. And, when we start talking about asexuality, there are, a dozen or 15, something like that, divisions within asexual people who are hetero-romantic but asexual, and homo-romantic and pan-romantic and bi-romantic. I mean, it breaks down in so many ways, and aromantic. You know, I've learned a great deal about that. You know, you mentioned the technical and legal stuff. I should mention that I'm a lawyer, not practicing. I'm admitted to practice in New York, but I do have a legal background.
Yeah,
but
I didn't want to out you as a lawyer there.
that's fine. But I think one of the things that I also bring to the kids is my own experience, because the kids are coming out at younger and younger ages, which I think is a fantastic thing. And yet they hear parts of my story about being closeted until I was 39 and being suicidal. And it really opens up for them, I think, a window into a time when being LGBTQ, you know, almost nobody came out at the ages that they're coming out. So I think that there's a lot of back and forth.
Do you get resistance then in terms of having a program for young people that is LGBTQ? Do you get resistance from, we talked about the religious right before, but just in general, what attitudes are there on the part of the gay, straight community, the non-gay, but straight community and general media in the program itself? How is it?
It's all been good. You know, and you know, you have to keep in mind that public radio in particular, and we are actually more in a part of public radio called community radio, and attitudes in public radio in general tend to be more liberal, and in community radio quite a bit so. So the stations that carry us love it. And the area actually that I was expecting I was going to have trouble getting kids right at the beginning. I had no idea how I was going to get kids. I had this idea for this program, and I wrote a document, which we now call the founding document, and it's on the website. And it was more about the why of outcasting than the what. And I didn't really know how we were going to find kids. I didn't know what kind of issues I was going to have getting kids. I envisioned somehow it was going to be in connection with the school, but I thought, you know, okay, I'm going to call somebody on the faculty, and the faculty is going to say, oh, well, you got to talk to my principal. And then the principal says, I've got to talk to the super, and the super says it's got to go to the school board. And the next thing you know, the school board is having public hearings, and, you know, I am there trying to defend my position to get kids involved with this show. But, you know, as far as the parents are concerned, they're going ballistic because here is this gay man coming into school to recruit children for his gay radio program. And, you know, I really thought that was going to be an issue. What I didn't know at the time was that there were these clubs called GSAs, Gay Straight Alliance. They basically provide a safe space where kids can come together and talk and get to know each other beyond the labels. And so I wrote to a friend of mine who was a teacher in one of the schools, and I just said, you know, here's what I want to do, and do you have any idea how I can get kids? And so he said, well, let me introduce you to the faculty advisor of our GSA. And so I went in and met with her and got the names of actually, she connected me with an organization that gave me the names of something like 60 to 70 GSAs throughout the lower Hudson River Valley. Mm-hmm. And so I just went to schools. I contacted the faculty advisors of the GSAs and said, can I come talk to your group about joining this new program? Mm-hmm. And, you know, when I got in touch with them, it's always been difficult to get in touch with them. But once I make contact, it's like, yeah, we'd love to have you come in. So I go in and I talk. And, you know, I think, again, you know, and this is something that we were talking about a little bit the other night. I think some people, and this could be a source of resistance among some people, I suppose, you know, a lot of people think LGBTQ, A, is a choice you make, and B, it's something you make, it's a choice you make as an adult. So you don't have LGBTQ youth. You could have LGBTQ adults, but that's when they get to a certain age and they choose it. And it's like, okay, well, we have to counter that with, when did you decide to be straight? When did you first realize you were straight? And it's like, okay, well, it makes just as much sense to ask an LGBTQ person that, it's something that deep down very early often in your life. So you can't always act on it early, but
okay, I want to get some time for some questions for folks in there, for folks who are with us. I know Dr. Nicholas Boston, who is on the faculty here at Lehman, had a question. Nick, do you want to open up your mic and go ahead and
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much, Jim and Tom, my colleagues. The three of us started at Lehman at the same time. We're sort of the old guard at this point. And thank you so much to Marc and to Justin for sharing your activities and this platform with us. And I'm happy to see we've got a lot of students in the room, some names I recognize, and so that's also wonderful. I just have two brief questions. One is, how do you negotiate when you're on the air the use of non-gender specific pronouns? Is that a challenge at all, or is it not? Is that a perception on my part? And to what extent do you sort of have a conversation about it before you go on the air? And then maybe specifically to Justin, I'd like to ask, do you see podcasting as a career future? That this is really a question for that intersects with all of what we do, right? And our students. And I'd love to get your perspective on that. So thank you.
Justin?
To answer the first question.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead. I thought you said what was the first question. Go ahead.
Oh, no. To answer the first question, it's really not that hard on my end, where it's just use they and don't really be too exclusive, unless I'm talking about myself or another outcaster. But usually it's just use they them, or don't even use pronouns really. So for me at least, it's not that big of an issue. And to answer the second question, maybe not a career, but more so I could definitely use podcasting in the future, or use it as some kind of outlet to talk about my own issues, or talk about something with my friends, because me and my friends have definitely talked about having some kind of podcast in the future or something like that. But I think for me personally, I never with radio and podcasting, for me it's personally very hard for me to do edit audio and stuff like that. So I was always more so the person who was talking, the host, something like that. So I could definitely see myself in the future doing a hosting job or something like that. But then background stuff for podcasting or radio, not too much.
Okay, well, we can definitely give you information about the program at Lehman when you're ready, and your friends too. The game show that you guys do is an unusual concept. Can you talk a little bit about what that show is, what it sounds like, and then we'll make links available towards the end of the program so people can actually check it out. But can you describe, first of all, what's it called?
The game show,
Yeah.
GAYME show.
Okay.
So it's a little pun. It's really cute. The best way I would describe it is a nice, friendly competition between the outcasters, where we'll get 3 questions each, and we'll be talking about different LGBTQ issues or LGBTQ news, such as things globally, not even just in America, globally, talking about different LGBTQ rights problems and people and things involving LGBTQ things and questions. So we'll be facing off with each other, and we're seeing who can answer all the questions right, or who answered them wrong. So it's a nice way to learn while also having a little bit of fun.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And again, anybody else who might have a question?
If I can just jump in on Nick's question for a second about pronouns. One thing that is quite common in LGBTQ circles is that some people just even in their email signatures put their pronouns right there. And a lot of LGBTQ people actually like being asked what pronouns they prefer. A lot of people take considerable offense if they are misgendered. Jim, you're straight and you're cisgender, which is the opposite of transgender. It means that your identity as a male matches your body as a male. And for people who are trans, that is not always an easy thing to negotiate. And so they are very happy to have the conversation about pronouns. And, I think one of the things that we found talking in the group is that as LGBTQ people and within this community of LGBTQ people and straight allies, that we welcome that kind of question. What pronouns do you prefer? And I think that some straight cisgender people might take offense at it, because it's like, okay, let's say I'm straight and cisgender and somebody asks what my pronouns are. And it's like, what? I'm not masculine enough. I'm not enough of a guy. You have to ask. But the LGBTQ people, I don't think I've ever run into anybody who has that feeling when they get asked the pronoun question. So I think the issue of just having conversations about pronouns, and it doesn't have to be anything long. It's like, what pronouns do you prefer? And then you try to use them. And some people, if you try to be respectful about it, are not going to get mad if you accidentally misgender them. I do it at Outcasting. It happened, and they gently remind me, and I gently try to be better about it. And it's it's just a sign of treating other people with dignity and respect. And why should we not want to refer to people the way they would like to be referred to? It's just a matter of courtesy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see how it could get awkward at times, because the perceptions are just are different. Going
but
back,
that also gets really heavily into gender stereotypes.
Yes.
And that's an area where there's a lot of diversity in the LGBTQ community. You have gay men who are very masculine. You have gay men who are more effeminate. You have women who are quite masculine, women who are quite feminine, and everything in between. And so there's a feeling of not needing to fit into those boxes. A feeling that you can be more authentic to yourself in the way you live your life and present yourself to the world.
Mm-hmm. Justin, I just put up the link to the game show that you did with Chris. Can you explain a little bit what that show was? What did you talk about in that particular show? Just to it had something to do with dictionary.com, is that right?
Yes. In that game show, it was my first one, never done one before. And one of my questions to Chris was, why did dictionary.com stop using the term homosexuality or homosexual? And it was like a question where it was like, hey, look, this company, dictionary.com, changed their wording for the LGBTQ community. Why would they do that? And it got Chris thinking, and it got like the listeners thinking, like, oh, like, why would they do that? Or like, oh, it makes sense, like either or. So I used that question, and it was cool. And it was the reason why they did it was because the term homosexuality and homosexual was used to like put the LGBTQ community down in the past, where they saw homosexuality as a sin rather than using it like a positive connotation. So I use that as a question, and I think in this game show, actually, we tied at the end, which is really interesting and it's really cool. So it's like we both learned a little bit at the same time, which is cool.
Mm-hmm. What I like particularly about this is that it's a form of education.
Mm-hmm.
That's something I never knew and wouldn't know. It's in a fun sort of environment, in a fun platform, and it utilizes some of the beauty of what radio is. In that this is a very intimate medium, and that you don't get that in other media, whether it be television or something like this. I mean, there's a little bit of that feeling, I think, in like a Zoom environment, because we're a closed environment. But radio is where, well, I want to go back to that. Why is radio, that you've been doing it now for a number of months, particularly in this time frame with what we've been going on since the beginning of the year with the pandemic? What is it that is, and you touched on it a little bit before, but if you could just talk a little bit more about it, what is it that is in radio that makes it better than just maybe writing an essay or doing a YouTube video? Is it the same thing?
No, because I feel like when I have an essay or I have an email or I have some kind of words, they can definitely be powerful and they can definitely send a message. But then if I read that email out, if I read out a poem, which I actually did for an outcasting OT about the Black Lives Matter movement and the intersectionality between being Black and LGBTQ, but it's more intimate. I'm literally using my voice and expressing how I feel. So I feel like when it's through radio, it's much more intimate, and the people who are hearing it are absolutely random. You can get a huge range of people listening in. You can get people who are on the far right, or on the far left, or people who don't even know what the term LGBTQ means. So I feel like it's really interesting. It's a really interesting and more intimate platform to get to a wider range of people.
Yeah, and Tom O'Hanlon, who was the chair of our department here, Professor O'Hanlon, was just bringing that out. Tom, you come out of radio. You wanted to mention the intimacy of radio, and
Yeah, I was going exactly where you and Justin and Mark were going. I found that intimacy is the word. You know, you don't have a face getting in the way sometimes, and you are whatever they want you to be as the concentration is more on your words and the message. So you're finding, Justin and Mark, that you get a deeper connection with people, that you have maybe a more productive or understanding dialogue with an audible medium.
I'm going to say no, because we are a recorded program, and so we are actually, we provide the program to the stations provide it to the listeners. So we don't really have a direct connection with the listeners. We know that the stations are wanting to carry it, but we don't know how that's affecting the listeners. And I think, working at a station, as all of us know, you can have that kind of connection. But, when you're a network program, you certainly could have that kind of connection in a live program, but in a program that is completely pre-recorded, as Outcasting is and has to be, we don't have that connection, and I wish we did. So
is
I
that
don't
something you see in the future, live programming that will be?
No, I don't think so. It's not really what we do. Our interviews, one thing that we have to keep in mind is, although we do teach interviewing skills at Outcasting, that kind of, to get really good at that takes years. And we don't typically have kids for years. We may have them for 2 or 3 years, but we don't have them for 5 or 10 to really develop those skills. And so when we're doing an interview, it's pre-recorded, it's stop and go, and it has to be edited. We've never really wanted to do a call-in kind of program. I talked with the first group of Outcasters when we were sort of deciding what the show was going to be, because as I said, when I wrote the founding document, it was more about the why of Outcasting than what we were going to do specifically. And I knew I wanted it to be something more than just kids talking about their own lives, their coming out stories and things like that. That kind of information is pretty easily available for people who want to find it. But the kids really liked, I explained the difference to them between event-based journalism and issue-based journalism. And, I think one of the things that we really need, especially with, with minority issues and particularly with LGBTQ issues, we really need issue-based coverage. And so we don't cover events. We cover issues in great depth with people who are really experts at them, or with people who have compelling stories to tell.
Again, I'm going to urge any of the listeners, viewers, who are out there who have questions to ask them. This is your final chance, because we're going to be running out of time in a couple of minutes. But in the last few minutes, I want to go back to you, Justin, as and something that Dr. Boston alluded to in terms of how this may have shaped your career goals. But how is this influencing you in your development as a professional, whether that be someone who works in advertising, or as a TV host, or as a writer, or as just someone working in a regular office? How is this experience enhancing you as a person growing up?
I think that it's definitely helping me work with people, because normally I'm just working at school or working at home, my family or something like that. But then with this, it's a group of random kids around our area, and it's just like we have to work together to get like a common goal done, and we have to work together to like adjust certain things. So I feel like it's helping me a lot with my work ethic, where it's like before outcasting, I wasn't not the best student or like not the best worker, but then through outcasting, I've learned how to work with people and how to manage my time a little bit better. And definitely working with Mark, it's not like I'm working under Mark. It's more like I'm working with Mark to try to get outcasting to be better, trying to get this message out there through outcasting. So I feel like that dynamic is very important when I'm gonna be an adult, because ultimately, like, me being a teenager is me training to be a citizen and me training to be a well-rounded adult. So I feel like outcasting provides that work ethic and that kind of like strive and that strive and prosper ideology, where we have to keep going to just get to the end goal. And when we get there, we can celebrate, we can be good, and yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, I for one can say that you are much more articulate and personable as a radio personality than about, well, most of the people I know that are in the business.
Thank
So
you.
you have a real future there. So
Mm,
if it's something you decide to continue to do, I encourage you to do that.
mm.
Closing remarks, Mark. How can people find out more about Outcasting and where to find the programming?
Well, again, it's at outcastingmedia.org. All the programming is there, from Outcasting Overtime, and from Outcasting Over the Clock, Off the Clock, which is actually Justin came up with the title for that series. It's the third series, which includes Outcaster of the Month, the game show, and sometimes some overflow commentary. If I could just say one other thing, COVID obviously has affected everybody, and we are no longer meeting in our studio until we can safely go back. Justin was talking earlier about being, most comfortable behind the microphone. One of the things that we have had to give up by not working in the studio, everybody's working at home at this point, is that the students are doing a lot less of the overall production process. They're much more focused with creating content than with editing and the other kinds of skills that go into putting it together. And that definitely is part of the outcasting experience when we're in the studio. And another thing, and one of the things that makes outcasting really a compelling life experience, and sometimes it's a life-changing experience. We have in the studio these conversations just about what are going on in the kids' lives, and a lot of the time that turns into programming. And it's a lot harder to do that online. We haven't really figured out how to do that, and I feel really bad about it because we're not giving the kids the what I consider to be the full outcasting experience. And so we have to do better online, but I can't wait till we can get back into the studio. But again, it's outcastingmedia.org. If anybody's interested in potentially getting involved, we're really looking for people who will be able to get to our studio in Westchester County when we can reopen. But if you go to outcastingmedia.org/apply, there's an application form, and it doesn't automatically put you into it basically creates an email that you fill out the form, and the form sends me an email, so you can tell me what you're interested in. And then if you want to contact me, you can go to the contact page right there. It also generates an email directly to me. So
Okay.
if you want to get in touch, that's the way.
Okay. Well,
Outcasting also, I should mention, the podcast, which includes all three series, is also on Apple Podcasts and some other podcast platforms.
okay, that's great to know. And we haven't even gotten into the differences between podcasting and speaking and radio, but that's a conversation for another day. In closing, I just want to tell you, first of all, Mark, how much respect I have for you as a broadcaster. I know you first and foremost as a broadcaster, and the dedication you bring to community radio is unsurpassed of anybody that I've known and have ever worked with. So a tip of the mic to you for never really giving up on your dream of community broadcasting, whether that community be a geographic one or a social one. So I think that's great what you're doing, and to see you getting distribution on Pacifica is fantastic. I would also say that you can look to Lehman. I'm talking for Professor O'Hanlon here. So Tom, leave your mic off. I'm volunteering us to be partners with Outcasting going forward, in terms of assisting in any way we can as your college partner. And finally, as a closing remark, Justin, you can come to Lehman. You know that. And we'd love to have you as a student, someone who is obviously talented and is interested in it. So if you ever want to do that, you know how to find me. So with that, I want to thank Marc Sophos.
Thank you so much, Jim,
and
everybody.
Yep, and I want to thank Justin, the Outcaster Justin. So thank you, Justin.
Thank you too.
And I'd like to thank Tom O'Hanlon for helping to make this possible, and our Dean of Arts and Humanities, James Mann, who couldn't be with us tonight, but is really supportive of the things that we do at the Journalism and Media Studies Department. So with that, if you do have any further questions about this, feel free to contact me. This recording will be made available through the courses that are involved. And once we make sure that we have proper clearances, it will most likely be available on the Bronx Journal website as a clickable link for folks to be able to at least listen to it. And very likely it may end up on internet radio, on the Bronx Journal radio stream at some point.
Jim, can I just jump in for a quick second? I'm just seeing that Talisa's got a question for Justin and Marc. Do we have time to take Talisa's question?
Sure, Talisa, go ahead. You can open your mic and ask.
Oh, hello. My name is Talisa Arias. I attend Professor Boston's Media Industries course. My question was, what is your long-term goal for this youth program?
Marc, you want to take that?
Sure. And I also see one from Santos about how often we have to explain what LGBTQ is to the audience. We don't. We did our first show where we unpacked what LGBTQ was. That was actually an Outcasting #1. But you know, we're assuming that once they've been listening for a while, they understand that, and it's certainly available on the website. But Talisa, to your question, we are sort of on the cusp of an expansion. We need to raise money to hire people, but right now all the programs are monthly, and radio stations are programmed on a weekly basis or a daily basis. And so my goal is for Outcasting, for all 3 programs actually, to be weekly programs. Right now we have our studio in Westchester, and even though we're not in the studio, it's all kids from the Westchester County area who are involved. Eventually, we want to have bureaus all over the country, some probably based at colleges and schools, places where there's a gay-straight alliance or sexuality and gender acceptance group, something like that, plus audio production facilities, so that we have a concentration of LGBTQ students and straight allies, as well as a place for them to work and create good quality audio. And so, you know, right now, the people who are involved in Outcasting are living in a place in the New York area where it's relatively easy to be LGBTQ, not necessarily in anybody's particular family or anybody's particular school, but as a general matter, it's easier to be LGBTQ here in the New York area than it is, say, in Kansas or Alabama. And we definitely want to have the voices of kids from those areas as well on the air. So the goal is eventually to have bureaus, you know, perhaps as many as, 20, 30, 40 bureaus all over the country where people can produce programming that fits in with our mission, which is to unite LGBTQ youth, straight allies, and the power of media and advocacy for a less unjust world. And the goal is to have all these bureaus contributing programming with me sort of as the editor-in-chief of all of it, but not having to be intimately involved with production of it from beginning to end the way I am here. And so does that answer your question?
Oh, yes.
I think it does.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think it involves money, it involves paid staff, because right now it's a volunteer staff, which means that there's me and there are the kids, and that's it. So to convert to go up to monthly, we would really have to have paid staff to do that.
Okay.
So
With that, we are out of time. Once again, I want to thank Marc Sophos and Justin for your conversation about outcasting. And with that, I will bid everybody good night and thanks for tuning in. And we will see everyone again next time. So good night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop recording now.